They're artists.
Yeah, the United States have an Argentina with an Italian.
I will say France looks scary, man. I think Argentina and France are like money. Like second tier is like Spain, Brazil,
And accordion.
but they're like Brazil. They have they almost. I mean, we're
Well, my mother goes Argentina. And the thing is, you don't know the story. My stepdaughter, she was 4. So she will show up with the Brazil t-shirt to her grandmother when she was not there. Yeah, I know it's very.
I understand. I feel the same way about that.
Stay with me.
He's ready to go, so would you welcome Dr. Yestyn Griffith.
The first piece we're going to play for you, we have 4 pieces today. The first piece is the Romance for Violin and Piano by Amy Beach. This is a very, I think, aspirational piece in terms of its character. Oh, my pedal's not working. That's so nice. That's so convenient right now. I'll get to you later.
I can turn pages for you if you want.
No, it's okay, it's okay. Seems to be... There we go. Let's go. Okay, we're good. Anyway, and then we'll move on to some solo violin stuff, and then in with a lecture and a Mendelssohn trio movement. Yeah. so the next piece is a sort of pair of pieces that I have assembled a bit haphazardly. We're going to hear the Largo. Oh no, oh, thank you. That is nice actually. We're going to hear the Largo from the Bach Sonata in C major, and then we're going to hear a piece called Win the Violin by Rina Esmail. This is a piece that takes a lot of inspiration from Indian raga tradition, and so we're sort of juxtaposing these usages of the solo violin, which evoke very different characters. The Esmail specifically is a piece that is longing to be seen in a moment of suffering. I don't know if you'll get that from the piece, but hopefully you will. instrumentation and then the trio movement. Oh, it's already there. Oh, no, never mind. And then you can press slideshow here. Nice. Would you mind if
You
there's
want me to advance
if,
for you?
if that's a possibility? I'm so sorry.
My poor finger.
I'm sorry. Okay. So, I'm going to try to go through this very quickly because we have a lot to talk about. So, this is the Mendelssohn Piano Trio, number 2 in G and C minor, opus 66, an exploration of rhetorical storytelling methods in a corrupted sonata form. Thank you. Background, if we can go ahead. So, one more, sorry. So, this trio was composed very, very close to Mendelssohn's death, just about 2 years before he and his sister died. Very morbid. It wasn't a more relaxed time for him when he was taking some time away from his professional positions in Frankfurt. Notable for this analysis, from an analytical context point of view, Mendelssohn has often been a composer who has been criticized quite derogatorily for being a little too classical, even in his time and even to today to some extent. There are a lot of people who basically claimed that Mendelssohn receded into classical forms and styles and did not really innovate much, as the Romantic period was getting more into pragmatism and things like that. One more, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so just a quick overview of the trio. We're only going to talk about the first movement today because that's the movement we're going to play. But as you can see, there are 4 other movements. Notable for this analysis is that the second movement is this wonderful chorale-like, very reflective, contemplative, melodic movement, and that contrasts what I'm going to argue the first movement does. We can go one more, or not.
Oh, yep.
It does that every once in a while.
So sometimes the projector overheats to fun.
Oh no. Well,
It was too turbulent.
so I can just keep talking for a second because the slides are kind of not entirely necessary. I think the next slide is an overview slide. Basically what we're going to go through in this presentation is I'm going to argue that Mendelssohn uses a modification of sonata form, which is a very distinctly, but I would say distinctly classical form, but it persisted for quite a while after that. And I'm going to argue that Mendelssohn uses local compositional elements such as the themes, the motifs, the textural material, combined with an intentionally altered version of sonata form to tell a rhetorical story in which the primary main thematic material basically takes over and subsumes the major mode secondary material. And if this revives itself, we can...
Over on the pad over there, there's an off, projector off.
Uh-huh.
Just let it sit there for a second.
Okay.
You can keep.
I mean, we can... Yeah, hold on, can I see where we are? So basically, that's basically the crux of what we're going to get to. But then we have pictures of themes and stuff. Well, I can play the themes. We'll improvise. So we're going to talk about theme 1, which, as you will hear, is this very sort of sinuous, flowing theme in C minor. Long notes at the end. But there's a few characteristics associated with this theme, one of which is consistent rhythmic palette, so it's constantly moving and sort of spiraling throughout. And so I would argue that this theme has almost maybe an overbearing quality. It never gives the audience time to breathe until the very end. The first segment of the theme ends on this half cadence, and it ends on it with these again, the wrong notes, but it is on this sort of punctuated, suddenly separate notes. And although there are usually no accents or tenuity on any of those notes, groups tend to play them a little forcefully. And I would argue that the reason for that is just this sudden release from the flowing 8 notes. So basically, if you think about the characteristics of this theme, it's, of course, minor mode, and it's using a lot of chromatism. So we have, for example, the very beginning, and then, so I would argue that it's a little discomforting. Oh, it's calming down. And this is our main thematic content. Our secondary theme is major mode. So immediately more rhythmically sparse, more potentially contemplative, very different in character. So we have these two diametrically opposed themes. Ah, there it is. It's that. And this theme, you'll notice, is characterized by these quite large leaps up and back down, and then these descents in stepwise motion. And that happens over and over again in this thematic material. And I think that that kind of leaping gesture can sound quite hopeful. I'm going to argue that in the context of the primary theme, the minor sort of threatening theme, it can sound a little desperate, and we're going to see an example of that. And that desperation is then potentially followed by, in some cases, depending on the harmonic context, this almost sense of defeat as the theme is sort of stepping down and relinquishing control. Can we go one more? Those are all the things I just said. One more, sorry, thank you. Wait, one back. Okay, another element of this trio movement is the intense virtuosic piano material. This underlies a lot of the entire movement, and it's usually derived from the main thematic material, and it just colors the whole movement with, again, what I would argue is this kind of overbearing color. If I'm saying that the main sort of antagonistic theme is taking over, this provides some antagonism just in the textural material itself. Mendelssohn referenced this specifically in writing to his sister Fatty in 1845, speaking about the piano part specifically, that the trio is a bit nasty to play, but it's not really difficult. So he was aware of this as an element, and I think it serves an important compositional role as well. I can go one more. So here's the first example of this kind of material. I would argue that, again, with this being drawn from the main theme, that this is a rhythmic diminution of the primary theme, theme 1. I mean, it's very abstracted, but just with these contour lines here, I would argue that this is a very abstracted rhythmic diminution of the second theme, where we have these arpeggiations where you start a note and then go up and then down in sequences of thirds. That's not so important, but just that it's extracted from that. Google one more. Here's an example where this is theme 2 material, so this is theoretically should be quite relaxed, but even here there is this constant, presence of the piano coloring this. I mean, it's marked in a way that, he clearly wants this to be more relaxed, but it's still so rhythmically active. It very, very rarely gives the audience a time to rest, or the musicians a time to rest either. We go one more. Okay, the last element here is what I'm describing as this march motif, which is just, which I'm thinking of as a very sort of ominous march that occurs and precipitates from the main theme and becomes more prevalent throughout the movement as the main theme takes over. Could we go one more? So I would argue that this is extracted directly from the main thematic material, where you have dominant and tonic, and then this starts an arpeggio, and then the next note here is this chromatic leading tone, and then we start another arpeggio, which gives us this note, and then we just have a dominant pickup back to the tonic, which gives us this note. Now you might think, that's a little bit maybe unjustified, but if we go one more, he actually pairs this a lot of times with cells from, so if we think that the main theme is largely built on arpeggiations of chords, he often pairs this motif with cells extracted from the main theme. So I think it was very intentional, that rhythmic relationship, and basically extracting the rhythm from the notes and the contours of the main theme. Can we go one more? Here's another example where what happens over the course of the movement is that it starts out, this march motif, as being quite linear and expressing a lot of pitch content, and then later it starts just settling. It just settles on the same note for quite a while, which brings, same thing here, it brings this sound to me that is a little like drums, because it's the same note over and over again. So if we're thinking of these as ominous drums, I think that manifests over the course of the movement. Can we go one more? Is there any-
That was delicious.
Can we go one more? Okay, form as story. So those are all the elements, but then how does he combine them in this corrupted sonata form? Can we go one more? I'm assuming everyone kind of knows what sonata form is. This is a very simplified version, by the way, for any of the theorists who are going to criticize me. Relevant to this discussion, so we have theme 1, key 1. Sometimes we have what's called a medial caesura, which is a little space before the secondary theme is introduced. It allows the secondary theme to emerge very clearly within the structure. And we have what's called the essential expositional closure, which is where the secondary theme is allowed to fully manifest itself with a very satisfying, perfect, authentic cadence that leads into the closure of the exposition. From a character-driven standpoint, from a rhetorical standpoint, I would argue that that's, in many cases, allowing the secondary theme to establish itself as a core part of the composition. We have development, where all sorts of things happen, and there's a lot of dialogue, we'll get to that later. We have recapitulation, where basically mostly the same things happen, except everything is transposed, and we have the coda, which is an optional addendum that sort of reconfirms a lot of the thematic material and tonality and everything like that. We go one more. So now, let's look at the way Mendelssohn organizes this trio movement, this quote-unquote corrupted sonata form. We have our theme in C minor that we talked about. We have no medial caesura, and we're going to look at how little of a medial caesura it is. He actually hides that structural point quite intently. And then we have no expositional closure for the secondary theme. So the secondary theme does have a few cadences, but structurally, it doesn't lead to the end of the exposition. It doesn't get to fill that role. Instead, that first more threatening theme that we talked about before creeps its way back in, now in G minor, in the minor 5 of C minor, and that's what closes the exposition structurally. So it's like the first theme interceding and sneaking in and stealing that role from the secondary theme. Yeah, that's all what I said. We could go one more. So if we look at the introduction, oh, this is so high. If we look at the introduction, this is the introduction of the secondary theme. There's a few things that you will notice. This is the first time we hear it. We have cells of the primary theme here. We have, again, very active piano textural material. And then this material actually overlaps into the introduction of the secondary theme, to the point that this secondary theme, which I would argue, I think as I played it, you could probably hear, I feel like its default character, or the character that it almost quote-unquote wants to have, is much more subdued, but it's kind of forced to be very loud and dramatic, and this is where, to me, I hear this sense of desperation in those leaps. It has to try to assert itself among all of the chaos of the textural material, and then if we go one more. What is this? Sorry, it's just so hard to see here. So this is the reemergence of the primary theme. So this is nearing the end of the exposition. You can see here that basically the secondary theme is completely dissolved, and we have now this reemergence in G minor, which is a very intensified reemergence because of this canon with the second violin, with the violin. But the violin is interrupting this material and creating a greater sense of intensity by overlapping them like that. We go one more. And then, sorry, it's just it's so hard to see what's going on here. Here we're looking at basically the end. So finally we have, this is all moving, and we have finally this structurally ends up being the cadence that leads us into the end of the exposition. And you can see that it's all based off of this primary theme material. The secondary theme has really no role here, I would argue. And potentially you could say that rhythm is a little bit leading to it, but that's also kind of the march rhythm from the primary theme. We go one more. Okay, so if we look at his development section, this is for me interesting, because if we're thinking of the development as the interaction of voices and the interaction of characters, the development section initially is very focused on the more relaxed, subdued secondary theme. And in fact, it is finally kind of able to manifest itself fully and be very expressive and wonderful, but there is often this sense of foreboding in the harmonic choices, and eventually the primary theme reemerges in a very, I think, threatening way to the secondary theme. So we can do one more. So, if we look here, for example, so this is into the development, we have beautiful statements in the violin and cello, the secondary theme. When we have it in the piano, we have it except normally there, and then we get this version which starts to augment the harmony quite a lot and introduces this augmented interval in the secondary theme. So, sort of like the pitch content of the secondary theme has been corrupted itself. We go one more. And if we look here, so this is secondary theme contemplated by the cello with this very active triplet material in the piano, and then suddenly, it's like a ghost. It just emerges for a second, this primary theme, da 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 da, in the violin. Again, as what I'm arguing is this very sort of threatening element. And so that is sort of what happens over the course of the development section. We go one more. And we get to the end, where this is the end of the development, and at this point, once again, just as in the exposition, the secondary major theme has been completely subsumed by that primary theme. It is fully taken over, and this leads us right back into our actual recapitulation. And then we go one more. So basically, over the course of the development, it's sort of collapsing harmonically, and then the primary theme takes over again. And if we look at the recapitulation, all of the same things happen, including the primary theme, the secondary theme, and then the primary theme interruption and takeover of that. It all happens in the same key, so C minor, C major for the secondary theme, C minor again for the primary theme. We go one more. And if we look at the coda, so this is very interesting to me because the coda is almost entirely focused on theme 1. Again, this aggressive, threatening theme, until a tiny glimmer of hope at the very end, near the very end, where the secondary theme reemerges almost miraculously once more after being not heard of for so long. If we go one more. So you can see here, for example, this is just demonstrating the degree to which the coda is using the DNA of the primary theme. We have primary theme cells here. We have the primary theme augmented in the strings, so literally overlaying these two things at the same time, which really intensifies. Just like there was the violin interruption before, now there is two versions of the theme happening on different metric levels. So this real intensification of this thematic material, and if we go one more. And so here, you can see we have the final desperate emergence of this secondary theme, trying to reclaim its position in the sonata structure. We have very chaotic piano material again, and then we have this real outburst, and we have, again, this sort of augmented, corrupted version of the secondary theme material, and that's the last version that you hear, and then there is this very discomforting resolution, quote unquote, that is not a resolution. And then, of course, somewhat expectedly, so it's as if the secondary theme has collapsed here, and now, again, we have primary theme taking over very violently right at the end, and the primary theme leads us all the way to the culmination of the movement. We go one more. What is this? What was I doing here? Oh, I think it's the same, yeah. Okay, conclusion, we go one more. So basically, just to summarize, if we think of sonata form as a rhetorical storytelling device where you have characters represented by themes and ideas and gestures, Mendelssohn is creating two diametrically opposed characters, and he's telling a story in which the primary theme character overtakes the secondary theme character. And he's using subversions of the sonata form structure to do that by allowing the primary theme to have more of a structural role than it usually would within this type of movement. He's also using the intense piano material to create this overbearing quality a lot of the time, even in moments where it is instructed to be a little more relaxed. The sheer rhythmic energy of it, I think, really keeps the energy up quite a lot. And the other thing that he's doing is he's obfuscating structural points. So as we saw where the intense piano material kept going even as the secondary theme was introduced. There's no medial caesura, there's no, okay, here's your secondary theme very clearly. The secondary theme has to constantly struggle to be heard within this trio movement. And now we're gonna play it.
off by asking, tell us something about your instrument and your bow.
So, very recently, did I buy a violin that was like a good violin. This is an instrument by a German maker around 1955, I believe. Not a well-known maker. No, nobody knows this person, so I was able to get a very good deal on it, I think. Like, I was shopping around for instruments for years, literally having instruments shipped to me and finding shops to go to and things. And finally, just randomly, a relatively unknown shop just sort of sent me this violin in a box of 4, and they didn't even really mention it. They were sort of like, oh, whatever, it's kind of in your price range, and it was like way better than anything else I had tried in that price range. I won't tell you what the price range is, but no, I really like it a lot. It's in very good condition for being that old as well, which is nice. The bow is a bow by Pierre Fuchs, who is a more known bow maker. He's a modern maker, so it's a modern bow and a slightly older violin.
Very nice, very nice.
Actually, welcome. I don't want to, any questions?
I wonder if you can just talk about if we should still be teaching Mendelssohn and Bach. If so, why or why not?
If like we as a society.
Yeah, and us, we as music professors.
Okay, yeah.
We should still be teaching and performing this old dead guy music.
So yeah, I think because that's a big point of discussion, and I think it's quite important. For me, there is, we talk about the canonic music, the music that is in the canon, and there's certainly discussions to be had about, well, why is it in the canon? Is that like a reasonable assessment? I think that we shouldn't necessarily choose music by like, oh, it's in the canon or it's not in the canon. But a lot of the music that is in the canon is really good. It's either good for developing students or it's just really excellent music. Oftentimes those two things go hand in hand. And so to me there's no reason not to play Mendelssohn and Bach and Brahms and all of these long dead composers. But what I think is important is that we also do a lot of other music. So that means newer music. But that also means music from older time periods from more underrepresented composers. So like, Rina Esmail is insanely successful. It's not like she needs my help. But, for me, programming music like that, or there's like a Cheng Yi piece that I really like to play. She's a modern Chinese-American composer. And so like, for me, finding music like that I can pair with maybe more traditional repertoire is something that I find very interesting and very satisfying to do. Also for students, you gotta learn the Bach sonatas and partitas. There's certain things you must learn. Part of which is because they just develop so much of your technique. But I think especially now, because classical music is so classical music is now taking in so much from other genres that I think it's actually quite important for students to be acquainted with other genres of music that they can play, or classical music that takes inspiration from other cultural music and other genres within, the US or wherever. So it's more that you should ideally do both, and then it's a matter of finding a balance between how much traditional rep do you assign, how much newer or underrepresented rep. And that's where the discussion comes in with the student of like, what are you interested in playing? Are you comfortable with the technique you have now? Do we need to identify some very specific things? So that was a very long answer. But do both, that's my answer.
I had just some thoughts I had while you were doing your presentation. You did such a nice job of balancing the theoretical stuff with the more like emotional impact of music. Can you talk a little bit about some of your influences in that style of analysis?
Yeah, so a big part of it is that I remember realizing at some point, I think in my bachelor's, that a lot of times there is a distinction between the applied practice and the theoretical stuff. It's like students go to theory classes and they go to history classes, but not always shall the two meet. A lot of times I was finding that students were learning all of this theory, but never really having an opportunity to apply it to their instrument. So, like when I'm teaching, for example, I really try to, not that I want to do theory lessons necessarily in the violin studio, but I do try to build some awareness of like, oh, what is going on? What is the context of this theme? What has this done before? Is this different? What is happening harmonically? So I think generally just that style of presentation just comes as a result of that style of teaching. And for myself as well, you know, whenever I have the time, it's not always, but I try to really go through and sort of, you know, do some score study and figure out what's actually going on. From a presentational point of view, I don't know if you know Bruce Adolph.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, love that guy. So there is some like actual influence, but I would say most of it is just, I try to integrate those two halves, right? And especially when students are taking theory classes, I'm like, oh, what are you talking about in your theory classes? Let's apply that to try to get them to really start using the theoretical knowledge in their performances. It makes things a lot easier, you know. But yeah, I would say it's just mostly that. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so quick question.
Oh, there's two. Sorry. Go ahead. No, you're good. You were first.
Go. More important. Go. I work here. That's right. See. I just wanted to ask, why, tell me about your solo pieces, because I really, really love the last one you played. Like, why'd you pick those three? What do each of them mean or do for you?
The beach specifically is just a piece that I really, really like. Like, it's so beautiful. It's one of my favorite violin and piano pieces if we're talking about like that style of orchestration. Of course, there are some really amazing larger scale sonatas. I like that piece because it is very much a song. You know, it's using the violin as a vocal device. And I think that that's, you know, we have the repertoire that goes sometimes fluctuating between, but I think that sometimes you can have repertoire that is very mechanical. I like that this is so vocal. We should play everything vocal, but you know what I mean, you know. And the Bach is another one where I just really like that piece. I think that it's one of his beautifully like through composed movements that functions so well in its context because it comes right after the massive C major fugue, which is like the longest fugue he ever wrote. And when you play that whole sonata, it's relaxing as a performer to get to that largo and say, oh, I can chill a little bit. I think he uses the violin really well. Again, it's song-like in a way, but it, you know, of course, it has this element of polyphony. And then the Esmael, I did a project, I guess 2 semesters ago now, where I did a bunch of raga transcriptions. So I listened to, because violin is an instrument that exists in that tradition quite stably, quite substantially. So I listened to a specific violinist. I watched like lecture videos that she had done about playing in this particular style. And I went through and I transcribed her raga performances, and then I learned them on the violin. And then that was part of a project that I just did for a class. And I really enjoyed that sort of explorative style where you're doing so much of this glissando, and it's a very different way than we typically play in Western tradition. And then I discovered Esmael, Rina Esmael, who is this composer who has imbued a lot of that style into classical pieces, whatever that means, you know. And so it's another piece that frankly I just like a lot. I don't have very good justifications, but I like it because of that. I think it's a very evocative piece. Again, this idea that it is distinctly programmatic. But I think that it is just so interesting from a compositional perspective, using the violin in this way and allowing people to explore that. And I can show you the sheet music. A lot of that is not written. A lot of it is sort of just written with normal notes, and you have to be cognizant enough of the genre to add a lot of the sliding and then to make the ornaments sound like ornaments instead of just, you know, groupings of notes that are stable in terms of their rhythm. So yeah, I don't know. I mostly just like them. That's mostly the answer. Yes?
If you can summarize or give highlights to your teaching philosophy, that would be great to hear.
Yeah. So I think that if I were to really try to summarize this very quickly, because I know I talk too much, a big thing that I try to do is first, when I'm first working with a student, is to establish some sense of trajectory. So it's like, okay, what do you want? And it's okay if they don't know, you know, that's also perfectly fine. But I want to be the person that is able to kind of direct students to somewhere that they want to go, whatever that may be. I find that a lot of times, you know, in my own experience or in watching peers of mine, there's this just sense of aimlessness, and that can be very concerning to students, you know, and I think that having an idea of trajectory really helps that, and being able to work with your applied teacher to fulfill whatever it is you want to do can be very helpful for building long-term progress. From a lesson-to-lesson point of view, I focus a lot on, I try to be, not always as good at this as I want to be, but I try to be quite conversational with students, like asking, what does this sound like to you? You know, why are you doing this way? What can you do to evoke this? Oh, you want this to be, you know, mellow and relaxed, but what are you doing with your techniques to do that, to, you know, elicit thought and to have, sort of open that dialogue. And another big focal point for me is, I started very late on violin, really late, like 16. And so for me, there was this massive catch-up that had to happen. And I felt like I did not have a foundationalized, like, comfortable technique until like well into my master's. And so I often see now bachelor students coming in who are struggling sort of fundamentally with achieving comfort with the instrument. So realistically, like a lot of times when I first get a new student, that's a lot of what we work on, is like, let's make the instrument comfortable for you to play. Sometimes that's setup, a lot of times it's conceptual. It's how are you holding the bow, when are you releasing the bow, are you able to release all of the muscles in your body, how are you standing, you know, basically analyzing that like biomechanical component to playing. And I mean, we were talking about this earlier, this idea of integrating the instrument into the body in a way that is very comfortable and that you can feel like you can rely upon your technique. It's not like it's going to be perfect, but I remember crossing that zone where I was like, oh, I'm not like uncomfortable playing anymore. And so for me, that's a really big component, because to me that sets up future growth. If they know how violin works, and then they can build on that knowledge, instead of just being sort of told, do this, do this, do this, and then they don't necessarily know where to go after you. Because the idea is that if they leave here, if they leave my studio, where are they going to go? If they're going to study with someone else, then okay, but if they're not, then I want them to be able to continue to progress. So, yeah. And that's a bunch of things, but yeah.
You started violin at 16. Did you have other musical experiences before that?
I played ukulele before that. I was like a vaguely musical child. I had a keyboard and stuff, but I never took like lessons or anything. And then I played ukulele because there was a Polynesian ukulele club in my high school. I was very interested in it. I highly recommend, by the way, ukulele. It teaches you rhythm, teaches you groove, it teaches you harmony. Very useful. And then they changed the program like halfway through, and they were like, now you need like a more established elective. And I was like, well, orchestra, I guess. The violin is small, right? My dad had a friend who played violin, and so, yeah, there was like music. My parents are interested in music, but they're not musicians, so it was kind of around, but very little music experience before starting that. And so then, like, frankly, going into a bachelor's program for music was a questionable decision on my part. Because it was like 2 years, and then suddenly you're in a bachelor's program and you have all this other stuff to do. But yeah, no, it was very, very, like, very random decision.
Did you start like private lessons in high school as well, or just once you were in your bachelor's program?
Yeah, so I started private lessons the last 2 years along with because I was like, well, yeah, if we're gonna do this, then fine, you know, may as well do it properly, I suppose. And that was very good. Like I think I had a very nice, very private teachers who gave me a lot, but certainly just because it was like suddenly I had to do so much with the instrument as well as everything else, it was very hard to catch up. And I look at videos of me playing as a bachelor student, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much tension, and there's so many things that if I were me now, I could solve, you know? So now when I see other students, I'm like, aha, I know how to help you. Because that's very recent for me. But yeah.
One more. I really appreciated like how you get in and out of silence. It's very like meditative, like the way in which you generate sound. On the other end of that spectrum, you have such a massive capability for sound and projection. It seems really easy. My question is, have you done much playing chamber music with winds, where sometimes that can be a challenge to overcome?
Oh, you mean like the balance of the winds and the strings? The strings are too quiet? Yeah, so I always tell people that, especially when younger string players, but older string players as well, I think necessarily part of getting better at a stringed instrument is being able to play louder, in my opinion, because we are competing oftentimes with instruments that are just naturally louder, and we don't want them to have to accommodate too much for us. Obviously, you know, there is some, you want to be cognizant, you don't want to just overwhelm everyone all the time. I can play too loud. I was criticized for it today. But, you know,
Complimented.
So, yeah, I do think that, like, I think that volume has a performative effect. Like I think of groups that I've heard where like I feel like the hall is filled. It's like you're bathed in sound. I think there's a power to that, like a performative power that you don't get if you're a little quieter. And another thing is that I think that playing loud on the instrument should be physically the easiest thing you do. So oftentimes I see situations where a student is trying to get a lot of tone by like forcing it, and immediately it's just, I try to point out that this is unnecessary. This is actually killing your sound a little bit, and, you know, crushing the vibrations. Because realistically, the way that we get sound out of our instruments is by doing basically nothing. Like we allow the arm weight to pull, and then there's a bit of a turn, but it should be physically the easiest thing we do. I will also say, that violin is just very loud. And like that did factor into my choosing of that instrument. I loved how easy it was to get a loud tone out of it. So that's also an element. But yeah, volume I think, and so especially when you get a bachelor's student, it's like, okay, usually, sometimes there's too much sound, and then we have to like refine, but usually I find that there's not enough sound. So then it's, again, it's a biomechanical thing of being loud is easy, communicating that, and then how do we get that consistently so that you're projecting with this soloistic sound. I haven't done much, because your actual question was chamber music with winds and brass. I've done a little, but like not that much actually, when I really think of it. So that was the real answer to your question.
Maybe more.
Thank you very much.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you all for coming.
So, once again, please